Can you work and travel at the same time when you have kids? Is it possible to spend 3 months, 6 months, even a year away from home, travelling and working, enjoying the culture of wherever you are, while still looking after children? And what are the options for you if your kids are school age? Well, that's what we're going to talk about in this week's episode. I'm Jeremy Klein, and this is Change Work Life. Hello and welcome to Change Work Life, the show that's all about beating the Sunday evening blues and enjoying Mondays again. If you want to know how you can enjoy a more satisfying and fulfilling working life, you're in the right place. Work from anywhere. Work and travel at the same time. A digital nomad lifestyle might be very appealing, and it's something we've talked about on the podcast before, back in episode 138. But what about if you have a family? Can you be a digital nomad when you have kids who need looking after, especially if they're school age? That's what we're talking about this week, and I'm delighted to welcome to the show Mauro Repacci. Mauro is a founder of Boundless, which helps families looking to work and travel abroad break down the common barriers that arise, whether accommodation, education, or finding and being part of a community. Mauro, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Jeremy. Very happy to be here and talk to your audience today.
So why don't you start by telling us a bit more about Boundless, what it does and who's it for?
Yeah, so Boundless was created to really enable families to become digital nomads. This market has existed for a long time, but is mostly catering to single people. And as a parent of three daughters, I felt that, we need to democratize access to a digital nomad community beyond singles or couples without children. So we created a new education system that enabled families to travel between locations while giving their kids a great education. And then also with that, a community of like-minded parents that also share that lifestyle.
And what specifically motivated you to get involved and set this up?
It's a combination of two factors. I would say on the side of the more individualistic is that I wanted to create this product for myself and my family. So I have three daughters. The oldest one would be on grade 2 today. And if we were to follow the traditional education, us as a family would have to be pretty much in the same location for all of the school year. And then it's really hard for family to move schools or move cities. So we decided to create this own system for my family so we could have this lifestyle. But also because we believe that the travel industry needs to change. The way people live and work needs to change because we are used to living in one place and then everyone goes at the same time on vacation to the same locations. And it's really counterproductive. And what we realize, humans and most of our customers are looking for better connections to the places where they go to. So instead of going for a week vacation to the Caribbean or Southern Europe, you will be there for 3 months living like a local. So that experience is something that, many of our families enjoy, but also have a better impact in the local communities where we are going to.
So we'll come on to talk about some of the challenges of travelling as a family. But first of all, what are you seeing motivates families? I mean, what's motivating families to spend these significant times away from home? So rather than just a week or two holiday, to spend 3 months, 6 months, even longer in a particular location?
There's a combination of 3 different factors. I would say the majority of our families are doing this for work and professional reasons. So imagine you have a team in different parts of the world, or you have business relations in these different parts of the world, and you want to split time between locations. So having that opportunity to bring your family with you while doing this is something very new and unique. The second one is for family ties. So today in a globalized world, families have relationships or parents and relatives all over the world. And normally the time that they could spend with those relatives are restricted to the vacation time and the school calendar. With remote work, now they have an opportunity to stay longer in those places. So I'll give myself as an example. My parents live in Brazil. Traditionally, you would go there for the Christmas, New Year's holidays and spend about 2 weeks with our families there and come back home in Canada. If you look at that, that's the busiest time in the year for you to travel, the most expensive. There's no storms, flights are canceled. There are a lot of things happening that make it really difficult and challenging for families to travel. But now, if I'm working remotely, I can easily go anywhere in the world where there's internet. So why wouldn't I spend 3 months there, close to my family? So that's the second reason is family and friends. And then the third reason is about lifestyle. So people like surfing, like skiing, like great weather, like sailing. So why not spend, 3 to 6 months per year in locations where you can do that instead of being restricted to one major city?
So I want to focus mainly on what you do with children if you're looking to do this when you've got children who are school age or younger. But just briefly, what are the other sorts of challenges that families face when looking to spend these extended periods abroad, aside from what to do with kids?
First is about visas. So depending where you go, you may be restricted to a tourist visa. So take like Southeast Asian countries like Indonesia and Thailand. Normally you'd be only allowed to stay there for a month. Countries within Europe, normally 3 months. So if you want to stay longer, you need a different type of visas. And the great thing is that in the last couple of years, a number of countries have announced what you call digital nomad visas. So allowing parents and families or digital nomads to work from there long term with a very good tax incentive. So that is something that is being changing very rapidly. Just this week, Spain announced their own visa. There are more than 30 countries that now have this type of visa, so it's making it very easy. But you still have a sort of bureaucracy and paperwork that you have to go through if you like to stay longer than a tourist in a country. The second one would be community, because I'll give myself as an example. When I immigrated from Brazil to Canada, it took me a number of years to build that community, new friends, get to know locals, have that support network around you. But imagine if you do that every 3 months, you have to make all these friends again. So having a community and traveling with other parents that are in the same boat is a way to minimize that impact, because there are great things about being a digital nomad, but there's also the factor of being alone and trying to get to know the new culture, new countries more often than you're normally used to.
So let's say that you want to travel, you want to spend extended time away from your home country, and you've got kids who are, let's say, aged 8 or younger. Can you talk through what the options are for looking after the kids when you're traveling?
Yeah, so today there are a number of options. They're depending on what the parents believe that is the best education system for their children. So I would go to the most like unschooling type of option, which is basically homeschooling or unschooling your kids. So homeschooling is a movement that started many years ago, is very strong in countries like the United States, where about 5% of the population is homeschooling their kids. And it's challenging because you as a parent now have full responsibility for the education of your children. My wife and I quickly realized that was not for us, because it's not as easy as people think. And the relationship, and that's what we're saying with our kids, the relationship between us and our kids is parent-child, not educator and child.
Most people who experienced lockdowns in COVID with kids probably realized that homeschooling wasn't for them.
Exactly. And that was our first conclusion, and one of the reasons why we decided to start Boundless Life. But the second option would be to sign up your kids to local schools. So young kids, talking about below 8 years old. So it's not really about academics, it's about socializing with other kids. It's about learning life soft skills. It's about, playtime. So you can sign up your kids to different schools. The challenge there is every school is different. So as a parent, my kids moved school within the same city, and that was a traumatic event. So it took them weeks to adjust. So how you make it easy for them to adjust? Now they are in one school, in let's say a Montessori school in Thailand, and then they go to Italy, and now they are in Reggio school. So it's really complicated for kids. So the other one is to sign up your kids to a school within the same system. And taking about the IB, for example, you can sign up them, or the French system. The challenge there is you're committing for a year. So all of those three options have some downfalls. Homeschooling is the parent taking responsibilities. The local alternative schools is the change. And the IB is the commitment for a year.
And presumably another option, I mean, maybe that's for kids a bit older, is boarding schools. So certainly here in the UK, we have lots of international children at private schools where they're here for board. So, the parents could be living in anywhere, but the kids come to here and they live at school. Talk about that option and particularly whether that really only starts at a certain age.
From our perspective, like boarding school has something that existed for a long time, and it comes from the principle of really delegating the education of your kids to someone else. What I believe in is actually the opposite. I think the way that the world is going, the economy is going, many parents will have now more time. AI is making our work more efficient. Technology is making us, more productive. So where do we spend our free time, which will happen inevitably? So I'm believing that, and this is one of the pillars of Boundless, is the parents' involvement in the kids' education and being close to their kids is so crucial. So for us, for my family, it's not even an option to consider boarding school. And most people that are part of our community also think the same way.
You mentioned how when kids are around, say, 8 or below, then school is less about the academic achievement and more about the socializing and, turning into a person, I suppose. Is there kind of like a maximum age where if your kids are above a certain age, it becomes harder to do this kind of traveling around whilst educating them at the same time?
Yeah, so today in our system, we have kids from age 1 to 12. What I've seen is much easier for the younger kids to adjust and adapt. As they move, is really the ties between a younger kid is mostly with their parents and not with peers. But as you get older, you don't want anything to do with your parents, and you want to hang out with your friends. So the challenge is, and we still don't have that problem yet because the oldest kid that we had is 13 years old. But I think 14, 15, 16, you really want friends. You want to, meet other people of your age. That becomes a challenge if every 3 months you move to a new place. So that's something that we are aware of. And we think down the line, there will be many families with older kids that would prefer to say split time between two locations. So maybe you can live in London for half of the year and Thailand for half of the year, and your kids can still have that group of friends that is constant. The other thing too, if you think back your personal life, how many of your friends are from kindergarten? How many of your friends are from, primary years? And then as you get older, you tend to keep relationship with those friends from, high school, university, and then work life. So the older you get, that relationship is more important. Being on the road becomes a challenge.
Okay, so let's go back to the assumption that we've got kids who are up to, say, age 8. Some people will want to stay in the same place for an extended period of time. So maybe it's 3 months, 6 months. Other people, maybe they've got in mind it's a year-long world tour. And so they don't spend more than a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks in the same place. Can you talk through how the options for looking after your children change depending on which way you go?
Yeah, I mean, if you're moving every 2, 3 weeks to a new place, it really limiting your options because you either homeschool your kids, like we discussed before, or you hire a tutor. And that's, it means you need to have a certain level of income to afford that. I have done 6 week trips with my kids over the holidays, and it's every week we're moving to a new country, and that's really vacation. Like you cannot expect your kids are gonna have formal education. Obviously, they're learning. Like you're learning by visiting a museum, by going to a science center. They're really growing and having great connections with the parents. But when you're in this journey, let's say a gap year sabbatical journey where you're gonna visit a number of countries very quickly, that's really limiting your options in terms of like the education, but also is an enriching experience. But from my experience and the experience of other people in our community, those type of short vacation is something that you're gonna quickly get tired of. Like the difference is when you're in a place for 3 to 6 months, you have time to settle and to familiarize yourself to like the bakery in the corner. They get to know you, and you start to live more like a local, and you really experience the location and the lifestyle of that country. And I think is something that is more enriching than going so quickly. But there's the advantage of going quickly is to find a couple of places that you're gonna love, and then come back to those places.
Do online schools exist?
Yeah, absolutely. Yes, for older kids, there is great options in terms of online schools. We don't believe too much in using like technology with very young kids. So anything below 7, based on the Finnish system that we use on Boundless, is we focus more on playing, focus more on real life learning. But as the kids get older, obviously, they need to learn academics, and that can be done online. And there is a number of emerging solutions, different way, different approaches, all the way from like learning everything by playing games, or learning like in a very traditional way, like a class, but online. So is very interesting for older kids. There are many companies doing this in a very successful manner. The challenge of online education is the social aspect, right? Because now you're thinking, imagine you have a 12-year-old and they're learning all their skills on online. So how do you ensure that that kid is going to spend time with other kids and learn other skills that you don't learn, doing just on a tablet or computer?
Again, I think that's something which people had a lot of experience of during the pandemic when that was the only option. And yeah, I think people realized that it wasn't ideal and it was very challenging.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, if someone wants to go the homeschooling route, either for, ideological reasons or because they've got in mind this, this big trip where they're just spending a week or two in places, and I'm sure it varies, but what can homeschooling look like?
Yes. So first of all, you need to see where you live, because in some countries homeschooling is illegal. So I'm not an expert on that topic, but there are some countries where the government clearly mandated that your kids must attend school. You cannot homeschool there. So if you're from one of those countries, then you cannot do it. But then you take countries like United States, UK, Canada, that where homeschooling is legal, then depending on the state or province where you live, you have to let the authorities know that you're going to be homeschooling your kids. From there, you have to define what you're going to use to teach them. And that could be an existing system. There are many different out there. And then could be either mostly doing it at home, but also you can leverage learning center groups. There are many solutions for homeschoolers out there, because this is an industry that have existed for a number of years. And in the beginning, homeschooling was associated with people who had, religious reason to homeschool their kids. But that quickly spread out because people realize, wow, 2 hours of academics, my kid is already learning everything. Now they have more time to socialize and enjoy life or focus in sports, focus in music. So there's a number of reasons between athletes, musicians, religious reasons, people that live far from city centers, ideological reasons that people seek that. And today there's tons of solutions there. I just don't know like how many parents are actually effective training their kids, taking responsibility for the education of their kids, which is something that you need to really think well about because you're not proving as an educator to your kid, right?
Yeah, it's clearly quite a lifestyle choice, I think, if you want to go that route. So let's talk about the family that is traveling and they're looking to stay somewhere for, say, 3 months. And let's say they've got one child who's school age and one child who is a bit younger, 3 or 4. So you're looking at kindergarten, nursery, something like that. What sort of options are available to them in terms of external schools or kindergartens?
Yeah, so we go back to local schools that you can have to convince them to accept you. So when I first started thinking about this lifestyle, we contacted a number of schools and my kids were exactly those ages. And we were like, we would like to spend 6 months at your place or 3 months, and then we'll move somewhere else. And many of them came back to us and said, sure, no problem. However, you must pay for the whole year. And then you must also pay for the whole year in the other location. So you're basically doubling or tripling the amount of money you have to pay for education, which makes it out of reach to many people. So that's was one of the reasons that we decided to start Boundless, is because all schools function on the full school year. And we are like, wow, there's no other options really except for online or homeschooling to enable you to do that. So we decided, can we try a school system and really transform that limitation that existed up until that time.
And what about international schools? I mean, aside from what you do at Boundless, I mean, are there schools which are set up to receive children for these more limited periods of time rather than, a whole year or even a whole, 6 years or whatever it might be?
To my knowledge, most international schools require you to stay for a year, for the full school year.
And when it comes to going local, is it even possible to put a kid into a state-run school for a brief period of time?
I don't believe that's a very easy thing to do. Imagine if you move to Portugal or Spain, for example. For your kids to attend a local school, you need to get local ID, tax ID, register yourself there on social services or health services. And then you have to actually be a resident of that country, which most people that are traveling will not even have time to become a resident. And then most of those schools are not equipped to teach kids that don't speak the local language. So that becomes a challenge. So most parents that are living this lifestyle are leveraging micro schools that are local but not run by the government.
And what about when it comes to nurseries and kindergartens, which, certainly in the UK, they're almost universally private. They're not, state-run, so you pay for those. Are those things that you can sort of dip in and out of?
So for those, it's much easier. So we're talking about, childcare, not really education. So in this case, there are way more options. One challenge that many families face is that there is limited spaces in many parts of the world. So there's a shortage of childcare facilities or services in many cities around the world. I'll name, for example, Montreal in Canada, where I had my 3 kids. When your spouse finds out she's pregnant, is the day that you need to put your name on the list. Because otherwise, by the time the kid is like 1 year old, you're not going to have a spot. And that's a challenge because they're operating at capacity. And now why would they accept a young kid at their place. At the same time, if you go to other parts of the world, there will be more opportunities to find spots for your kids, but mostly outside major cities.
I'm sure it varies from country to country, but if you are looking at international schools for children aged 7, 8, 9, something like that, what sort of fees are involved for, be it 6 months or if you have to pay for a year?
Normally, you should assume that a high quality international school anywhere in the world will cost pretty much the same. And if you think about this, is say why in Brazil or Thailand, where cost of living is much lower than, London, New York, San Francisco, why I should pay the same tuition or similar tuition? It's mostly because educators that are hired by those schools are international educators. So they have the option to work anywhere in the world, and they're hired and moved to that country. And therefore, if you look at the cost structure of a school, labor, like the salaries, is a major factor. So that being said, you're looking at anything between $700 or US dollars a month, all the way to 2,000. And that depends on the ratio of students to teachers, the quality of the school, the brand of the school, and so on and so forth. So in many locations, think Bali, for example, you're going to have a school for 700 and you're going to have one for almost 2,000. Thailand, same thing. Southern Europe, same thing. So you're really looking at high price. It's not a low price for families. And that's, the price you really pay for the quality of the education of your kids.
When it comes to the decision to go traveling, so take your experience. Maybe you've got a 7-year-old who's at school. They've been at the same school for 2 or 3 years. How do you approach the conversation with the school to say to them, look, we're planning on going traveling. I'd like to take my daughter out for a year and then bring her back again?
Yeah, that's a great question. So normally we actually did that. We told the school that we wanted to take our kids away 3 months a year. And in Canada, obviously, those 3 months will be the winter. Like right now, I'm looking at the weather in Montreal, minus 40 degrees. Like no one wants to be there. And so we told the school, can we take our kids away for 3 months and during the school year? And first they said yes, because she was on kindergarten. And then second time, she was in grade 1. And they said, no, that's not allowed. You need to attend the full year here. And then, so we said, okay, no problem. So she attended that year. And then come September, when she's supposed to enroll again, we let the school know. It really depends on the school and how competitive it is to get in. So if you're looking at very competitive schools, what they will do is just say, no problem, but when your child comes back, she or he will have to do a test to ensure that they meet the criteria that that school is looking for. If it's a public school and you're in the attendance zone or the area that a school must accept your kid, so that's no problem whatsoever. But most of the time, if you're talking about private school, they have a admission process. They're going to apply the same process they would apply to a kid that immigrated there. So, which happens all the time. Families move to different cities, different countries, and they need to look into that to see if the kid is suitable for that specific year or not.
So you've got to make sure that when they're away for that year, that they're getting suitably educated, that they can do and succeed in that test when they come back.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think this is something that is overstated by many parents. Like the reality is, if you take a 7-year-old for a year and travel the world, and you're together more than you would be at home because you're working less or you're working different hours, and your kid is seeing all these different cultures, is listening to all the different languages, and visiting all these amazing museums and science centers, when your child comes back, it's likely that at that specific age, your kid will be way ahead that you ever imagined, because you can see that on a vacation. Like, you take your kids for a month and they learn so much and they grow so much within that short period. The reality is the school system that we have is so outdated that kids are bored. Like, they're spending 1 or 2 hours a day actually learning, and the rest, they're just there because parents have to be at their jobs and the kids have to be somewhere else. But the reality is the amount of learning that is happening is very limited.
We've spoken a lot about schools and education, which is going to be very in people's minds. But something else that I guess people are going to be worried about is the availability of healthcare. So, what happens if your child gets sick? And I guess in some countries, that's perhaps going to be of lesser concern in terms of facilities, but then there's going to be other countries which perhaps don't have such developed healthcare systems. So, again, what are the options available to, make sure that something is in place if something should happen?
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the things that we first got when we started thinking about this journey was to sign up for an international healthcare system or international healthcare plan. It's different than a travel insurance. So that's what people don't understand. As you need to make sure that what you have is really a healthcare, not an emergency travel insurance. So when you travel for a week and let's say you go to a resort, when you book your flight, most credit cards will offer, $1 million or whatever of emergency travel insurance, but that doesn't cover like vaccine checkups, like routine things that you need to do with your kids, even as adults you need to do when you're traveling. So today there are a number of providers that cover global health insurance, and that's an industry that is growing really fast because millions of people are seeking this lifestyle now. And then ensuring that you have that's the first part. The second one, as a family, obviously, as a parent, I'm more concerned about where I go, right? So I'll check what is the quality of the healthcare in that specific country. And you'll be surprised that most countries, there will be international hospitals. There are to the level that you're seeing in developed countries. The difference is they will take care of basic and say mid-level cases. If it's a very extreme, serious case, then you'd have to be relocated to another place. So, but most of the places that we've been to, we encounter a few things. Like, we were in Brazil in the very remote place on the beach. Our second daughter started getting mosquito bites, so she had an allergic reaction. So we had to call the emergency doctor, came in, gave some injections, then she got better. That's like, obviously as a parent in a very isolated place, it's quite stressful situation. You're not even living at Justiniano, you're on vacation there. And then also you need to watch for different types of vaccines that are required to different places that you travel to. But there's a number of things that as a parent, you need to watch for. But today, there is more quality in terms of international healthcare as long as you have either insurance or budget to pay for it.
Okay, so we've talked a lot about the practicalities. Where I'd like to finish up is first talking about sort of just the general pros and cons of doing this. So, what would you say is the biggest upside to spending a year traveling, maybe spending that year in 2 or 3 different locations as a family?
Yeah, I say the first is to have the freedom to be where you want to be, when you want to be. And that's like really a game changer when you start thinking about it. And stop thinking about like, I live here and I take vacation in this other spot. That's a very limiting thinking that has been in our minds for so long. Now, with remote work, we don't really need to be in those places. So I would say the advantage is this feeling of being free and being able to make your own decisions. The other one is how enriching that experience is to everyone, to the parents and the children. So new cultures, new food, new connections, experiencing all of this together as a family is something that you will never forget and will stay with you for a long time. The other one would be the connections and relationships that you build along the way. The challenge is when you come back home, you may not feel you belong there anymore. And you have this bug that you need to be out and traveling and continue that journey. And what I noticed too, like when I first started this project, we thought our customers would be people going on a gap year sabbatical. And I'm tired of living in London and New York, or, I want to go around the world for a year and come back home and continue with my life. And after doing this and having hundreds of people as part of the community, we realized that not many people are thinking like this. They are not thinking about a temporary solution. They're thinking, can I have flexibility to be in my hometown for a large part of the year and then be somewhere else for the other part of the year? So, for example, Canadians, there's this no-birds concept, right? So when you're retired, you don't stay in Canada for the winter months. So every Canadian that can will go to Florida, will go to Phoenix, you go to Mexico. Why wait until you're retiring to do that if you can work remotely and you can find great education for your kids? So now people are moving that lifestyle early on to their adult life and really enjoying to the fullest.
And someone who's listening to this and thinking, this kind of sounds interesting, but I've absolutely no idea where to start. I mean, what's the first thing that someone can do, or the first things that they can think about before deciding whether or not this is something that they want to do?
There are a number of tools out there that were created over the last year or so to help families make that decision. So for families, obviously, health insurance is quite important. So one company I recommend is Safety Wing, which has not only health insurance for families, but also a lot of content to help families decide on great locations for them to go, how to navigate this change. Now they're working also on other types of insurances. So really to make sure that when you're traveling, the health part of your family is really covered. The other one is a new tool called Citizen Remote, which is a database of visas and places to stay and information for families that want to pursue that lifestyle. And it's great. It's a great app with lots of content and make that visa part very easy. Simplify that. But the other thing is, if you go to YouTube or Instagram, you see a lot of other families doing it. So if you follow their content and see, how are they living, around the world with 4 kids and one being a 1-year-old, and then every 3 months or 2 months they're moving to a new place. It's really looking so easy that people will wonder, wow, why I can't even go for a weekend somewhere where these families are living, around the world with their kids.
And that second resource, it was called Citizen Remote, was it?
Yeah, that's correct.
Well, brilliant. Mauro, you've given us an awful lot of content here and a lot to think about. I mean, clearly this is something which is doable, but on the other hand, there's clearly quite a lot to think about. If people want to find out more about you and about Boundless, where would you like them to go?
You can take a look at our website, boundless.life, or just search for Boundless Life on social media, and you can find how families are living this lifestyle.
Brilliant. I'll put links to those in the show notes. Mauro, thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Okay, hope you enjoyed that interview with Mauro Repacci of Boundless Life. My big takeaway from this conversation with Mauro was that it's definitely possible to travel when you have school-age children and take them with you, but you've got to be quite clear as to what you're looking to get out of the trip. If you're looking to spend most of your time on the road, laptop in your bag, bringing it out when you get to an internet cafe and working as you travel, well, yes, you can do that with kids, but the option for educating them is basically just going to be homeschooling or looking after them as you go. From what Mauro was saying, realistically you can't expect to put them in any kind of school or educational setting. The longer you're planning to stay in just one location, then the greater the number of options available to you. I also thought he made a really interesting point that under the age of 8, children, well, it doesn't really matter what they learn as such, it's much more about the socialising and just learning whatever it is they learn. If any of you listening to this are teachers, I'd love to hear whether that's something that you agree with. There's links to the resources Mauro mentioned, a copy of the transcript, and a summary of everything we talked about on the show notes page for this episode, which is at changeworklife.com/156. That's changeworklife.com/156. And whilst you're there, I'd love to hear from you. Is this sort of topic for podcast episodes helpful for you? If not, what's the sort of thing that you'd like to hear? I've said it before and I'll say it again, I want to make this podcast the most useful thing that you can listen to, and the only way I can really do that is by finding out from you what it is you'd like to hear. If you go to changeworklife.com/contact, that's changeworklife.com/contact, then you can send me a message there. So please go ahead and do that and let me know your thoughts. I'm really looking forward to the episode in 2 weeks' time. It's all about productivity tools and hacks, specifically what sort of tools are available to help you get more out of your work. There's a ton of productivity apps out there, so how do you choose which one is going to be the most impactful and useful for you? That's what we're going to be talking about in 2 weeks' time, so subscribe to the show if you haven't already, and I can't wait to see you in 2 weeks' time. Cheers. Bye.